Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of It. Welcome to Derry episode 3. Now you see it. And it is literally what the main characters of this episode now see. The infamous clown form of it. And the scariest part of that is any physical documentation you obtain of it is itself now a haunted gateway through which this thing can get you. Lots to break down this episode. So let's go through it scene by scene for all the Easter eggs, references, and tie-ins to the broader world of Stephen King. And by the way, the shirt I'm wearing is our exclusive design, Face Your Fears. And yeah, now you see Jump Scare It. This is available at our merch store, nerdriot.shop. It's the best way to support us at New Rockstars. Episode 3 opens in 1908. 1908 was the year of the Easter Sunday Kitchener Ironworks explosion in Derry that killed 102 people. That has been depicted in the opening credits of this series, and now we know it'll be the setting of season 3 of this show. It doesn't seem like this is a prologue scene set on Easter Sunday, but I assume young Francis Shaw and young Rose will be part of the events leading up to the 1908 disaster. Last episode, in the Special Projects Warehouse on the base, the team that General Shaw oversees recovered a piece of the Kitchener Ironworks sign. A rapid series of carnival games where people have to throw stuff all comes at once. A knife thrower at a woman on a spinning target, a balloon popping from a dart, balloon, and then a clown knocked over, clown. And then we see 3 slingshots, the prize that Francis's father will win. We see signs for Slorak, the man-ape, the skeleton man, the tattooed girl. It seems like it'll be the skeleton man that ends up frightening Francis most of all. Others include the dog-faced man and the Lee twins, who aren't just conjoined at the hip, but in Francis's terrifying nightmare vision at least, seems to be a dripping exposed organ that connects them. On the target board, only one clown has red hair, which I'm assuming is a form of Pennywise, and you'll notice on the row beneath it are turtles, as Maturin the turtle is the cosmic opposite to Pennywise, and beneath everything, carrying us all. The balls knock over the clowns, but don't knock over Maturin, because can't bring him down. And Francis sees one lone clown who kind of looks like a child, carrying a bunch of red balloons in the distance. This clown's poofy hair is all white, and he turns his mostly white face toward Francis in a way that's super understated and just very creepy in the edit here. The carnival barker for the freak show lowers his voice so that he's basically inviting just Francis alone to venture inside.
Step right up.
On the freak show sign, the seal boy balances a red ball on his nose that kind of looks like a red balloon or a red bubble he's inflating. So starting in the late 19th century, carnival men like P.T. Barnum popularized traveling freak shows like this that mixed real human oddities with trickery. So we don't know if everything in here, like the gruesome conjoined twins, are meant to be real or something in Francis's mind, or just a prop that was designed by these carnies to scare attendees like Francis. As Francis goes into the freak show, that lone white-headed clown with the red balloons continues to sit on the steps of his trailer in the background. Hey, maybe this is just a young form of Pennywise who just woke up here in 1908, picking targets for his massacre. This Hall of Mirrors reminds me of the modern carnival mirror maze in It Chapter 2. Remember when adult Bill was unable to save that kid from Pennywise? The pianist who tells Francis to keep moving seems to be a cameo by showrunner Andy Muschietti. The music he plays turns into a waltz version of the main It 2017 theme composed by Benjamin Wallfish, the music that played over the prologue scene of Georgie's death. You know, the na, 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 na. As Francis goes into a dark area, we do see 2 yellow lights that look vaguely like the glowing eyes of Pennywise, but this is the area where the skeleton man hangs out, and he strikes a match to deliver a jump scare to show his skinny frame, missing teeth, and empty eye socket. Francis runs into his dad, who seems to be a big fan of Teddy Roosevelt here in 1908. He won him one of the slingshots. Now, the slingshot as a tool is a much bigger deal in Stephen King's novel, and in the 1990 It miniseries on ABC, it's the weapon that the Kid Losers Club uses to fight Pennywise, using a melted down 1925 silver dollar and Bev's amazing aim to deliver a powerful blow, because they believe silver hurts monsters from folklore, and that gives them the confidence to repel the entity in their youth. Of course, it's a sling that David used to slay Goliath, and Stephen King's use of the slingshot is kind of like an Excalibur for these kids. Andy Muschietti did not use the slingshot in the 2017 film. The kids end up using a bolt gun that Mike's family used on sheep, and even though it wasn't loaded, because Bill thought it was loaded, that gave him the confidence to hurt Pennywise, and that fearlessness delivered. By bringing the slingshot back into the lore here on this show, it seems like Andy Muschietti could be using it as a historical artifact that ends up being an important weapon in the hunt for Pennywise. Its Y shape also makes it the shape of a divining rod, a tool used to locate water for wells that Dick Hallorann will use in a similar way later this episode. As Francis and his dad leave, we focus on that child clown. Their face paint has similar lines running up the cheeks that Pennywise has, and their gloved fingers brush a brass bugle. We're gonna keep our eye on this little freak. Their car overheats tweets, "Since it says 1908, I feel like few days in the year in Maine are hot enough before Easter for things to look like this, but I also think there's no way this would be after the Kitchener Ironworks explosion for some reason. Like, I think we're seeing the build up to that event." Francis buys some jarred water from indigenous kids at a stand, having only 3 pennies, and pays for the rest with his slingshot. And this is kind of the meet cute of Francis getting sweet on young Rose. He spends his time playing with her and her friends, but he runs off into a shaded part of the woods where, in the distance, Pennywise now takes the form of the skeleton man peeking out from behind trees, the same quickness that Pennywise did as the people in the grocery store stalking Lily in episode 2. But this being a woods setting, there's also some Slender Man vibes here, using the background branches and the chaos in the background to visually confuse the person. I love this single shot where the skeleton man slips behind a trunk in the distance and then pops out from a closer tree. Then, of course, he's right over him.
Hello.
Yeah, compared to the voice we heard before for the skeleton man, this sounds very much like Bill Skarsgård. The skeleton man now chases Francis, gaining on him. Like Ronnie's mother, he now transforms into a distorted CGI monster, his limbs growing longer and thinner as he runs like a spider. Pennywise does take the form of a giant spider in It, and now both eye sockets are empty as his mouth fills with the fangs that we usually see from Pennywise's mouth. Rose uses a slingshot to hit skeleton man with a rock, the kind of aim Bev Marsh will have, and his blood floats upward. This is how Pennywise would bleed in the 2017 and 2019 films, the idea being that down where he is, everything floats. I broke down the opening credits frame by frame in our breakdown of episode 2, but one detail I did not mention that directly applies to the 1908 events in episode 3, in the shot of the Kitchener Ironworks explosion, you can see Pennywise's red clown trailer pulled up on the left. It's not exactly the trailer with the white-haired clown, but it does seem to be the trailer that Dick Hallorann sees in his vision. At Juniper Hill Asylum, Lily's mom, Miss Bainbridge, comes to pick her up. Other than the unwell patients and some screaming in the background, we don't get to see the horror it seemed to be setting up last episode. Dr. Petronich ups the girl's dosage of chlorpromazine. That was an antipsychotic introduced in the 1950s to treat patients with schizophrenia and other similar issues. Lily chats with the head of the nursing staff, a very kind woman played by actress Madeleine Stowe, who tells Lily she believes her if she saw the impossible, that life is really a journey where it's most important who you go on that journey with. And she returns to her the charmed bracelet where you can see a horseshoe, a bell, an anchor, and Maturin the turtle on the other side of it. Now, they haven't named Madeleine Stowe's character, but she is in the top billing for the series. We assume she's going to be someone important. Maybe she's a representative of Maturin the turtle. Chief Bowers meets Hank Grogan in the cell and offers him some Pall Mall cigarettes. Pall Malls pop up a lot in Stephen King's books. The villain of The Dark Half smokes them constantly. They were also in Salem's Lot. Stephen King said himself that he used to smoke 2 packs of them a day. Hank says he prefers Embassy Golds. Bowers says that he can sniff a liar out a mile away. Since he was at The Falcon last episode, a known gay bar in Derry, I do just have a lot of questions about Chief Bowers and where he gets that intuition about people who often have to hide things about themselves. Bowers says he is an eyewitness that put Hank on Jackson Street on the night of the murder. In the opening shot of 2017's It, we saw Georgie's death happen on the corner of Jackson. Bowers pulls out a pack of Embassy Golds, and even in this case, it's really circumstantial evidence, but he is trying to get a confession out of Hank. Bowers asks,
"Do you know what they do to kitty killers in Shawshank?"
Of course, Shawshank Prison is the main area prison in Stephen King's universe from his novella Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption, which was adapted into one of the best movies of all time. And speaking of the Shawshank Redemption, the close-up of Bowers' cigarette as it hits the ground and him stomping it out, it's exactly Frank Darabont's shot of Warden Norton's cigarette in the exercise yard, the gesture that the warden set up as a signal to Captain Hadley on the guard tower to execute poor Tommy Williams. I'm worried Hank will have a similar fate on this show. Thanks to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. There was a time in my life years ago when I was so overwhelmed with my responsibilities at work and some major emotional life events that I knew I should reach out to a therapist, but even though I knew it, I just couldn't. Starting therapy felt like another unsurmountable challenge on my plate at a time when I barely had the bandwidth to do simple things like eat, shower, and leave the house. It got to a point where I had to just be like, okay, today, the one thing I'm going to do is make an appointment. And man, I wish BetterHelp had been around back then. It would have been so much easier. BetterHelp knows how much of a hurdle starting therapy can seem like, which is why they've gone to such lengths to make starting therapy easy. If you go to betterhelp.com/newrockstars, you'll find a short questionnaire to fill out. After you're done, BetterHelp will match you with a licensed therapist in as little as a couple days. If for whatever reason you and your therapist don't click, you can switch therapists at any time for no extra cost. BetterHelp accepts both HSA and FSA cards, making it easier to prioritize your mental health. In 2024 alone, over 137,000 people use their HSA or FSA benefits for therapy through BetterHelp. So be sure to use yours before they expire. Click the link in the description or go to betterhelp.com/newrockstars and get 10% off your first month of therapy. Meanwhile, in school, someone wrote with lipstick on Ronnie's locker, "Hatchet Hank's gonna fry." Gonna fry is the phrasing the entity used as Ronnie's mother in episode 2. Nearby, you'll notice Patty's friend Rhonda, that's a gum chewer, seems to be wearing the same bright shade of lipstick, and that's probably why she's smiling here. Rich tells Will that they must have arrested Hank for a reason.
This is America. You can't just throw people in jail for nothing.
We talking about the same country?
Oh, Rich. The Behind the episode last week really focused on how Rich is a Cuban American in a particular year when the emerging Cuban Missile Crisis really made a lot of Americans suspicious of Cubans. So I hope this naivete isn't setting up something really bad to happen to Rich. Lily apologizes to Ronnie and offers to help her prove that Hank is innocent by trying to photograph the entity. Ronnie says that they can't take it to Keen's to get developed. A reminder that Keen's is a Derry pharmacy with a very creepy Mr. Keen in 2017's It. Colonel Fuller says that they inspected the 1930s car that they dug up and they didn't find anything. General Shaw says,
What we're looking for was buried in Derry 300 years before the automobile was even invented.
Okay. Not sure what Shaw's date for the invention of the automobile was, 1889 as we know it to be, or maybe closer to the turn of the century, but he is suggesting that this weapon he's looking for was buried in the late 16th century, either colonial or pre-colonial America. Now, according to Stephen King's lore, the extraterrestrial asteroid that brought the entity known as It to Earth happened long before that. But in Muschietti's timeline, Derry was founded in the year 1791, and in that winter, all 91 citizens disappeared, kind of like the Roanoke colony. We don't know if Shaw is looking for whatever it brought to Earth, or more likely some kind of weapon buried by Rose's ancestors before European colonists arrived in Maine as a way to control or restrain the entity. Fuller confirms that the car was part of the 1935 cycle and describes some of the Bradley gang shootout. The fact that Fuller and Shaw are using the term cycle tells us that they figured out a lot about Pennywise's history and the way he comes back every 27 years. Fuller adds,
Eyewitness reports at the time suggest sightings of the entity in one of its forms.
In the book, Norbert Keene tells adult Mike Hanlon about this event and says some people claim that they saw a clown there that day shooting a gun. So in the opening credits, when we see Pennywise Lee Harvey Oswalding out that window, that's probably something someone actually saw on that day. Dick Hallorann hangs out with his airmen buddies and claims to have spent a night in Detroit with Aretha Franklin. This episode hints at these guys wanting a better place to hang out, and in the book, Dick Hallorann is the co-owner of the Black Spot, a bar that I assume we will be getting to this season. Hanlon and Russo pilot Hallorann in a tandem rotor helicopter. That Philly cigar box that Shaw gave Hallorann contains his old slingshot that Hallorann now uses as a Y-shaped divining rod. Immediately when he opens it, we hear a creepy buzzing sound. Hallorann uses his shine abilities to flash back to Francis and Rose escaping the tree line, probably the tree line that he's now flying over. And now we see young Francis asking,
why can't it leave the woods?
We don't get an answer here, but it could come down to just superstition and belief, since Pennywise operates based on how much people fear it, or maybe Rose's people actually buried some powerful artifacts along that tree line, beacons to form a boundary. We do a Saving Private Ryan rapid aging on young Rose's face to adult Rose in this tribal hearing concerning the military operation digging up these areas. In It Chapter 2, the Native Americans in Derry are identified as the fictional Shokapiwa tribe, so presumably this is a tribe that Rose is now a part of. Rose's son whispers that they found the car.
We have to do something now, Auntie, before they get any closer.
This tells us that this tribe also knows exactly what is buried closer to there. The character of Rose was described by the actress playing her as, quote, a clan leader of the children of Maturin. So that tells us that Rose's tribal group, maybe even for generations, are a group of guardians who serve Maturin and Maturin's goals in resisting the It entity. Children of Maturin is a completely new thing that this show is introducing to Stephen King's lore. Back to Hallorann and his trance, Russo talks about a buddy at Fort Bragg saying that the government is doing mind control on goats. You can read more about this in the 2004 book, The Men Who Stare at Goats, or in the film adaptation. But in the 70s and 80s, there were reportedly some government-funded programs based on New Age thinking to try to apply mind control, experimenting on goats. Here in 1962, it would be a bit earlier when we think that stuff happened, but who knows what the government was involved with when. Hallorann walks down the helicopter and you'll notice it gets thinner and more narrow, like a tunnel, and we see there's water on the floor, and then a sewer hatch closes behind him as Hallorann mentally finds himself in the Derry sewer chamber where the climaxes of It and It Chapter 2 take place, where Pennywise piled up all the bodies he has collected over the years. We see a bowling pin and a baseball player figurine floating at his feet. Are these other artifacts or belongings of the people that Pennywise has claimed? You'll notice at the base of this body pile is Pennywise's clown trailer, the one that was parked beside the ironworks explosion in the opening credits. Pennywise's yellow eyes appear from the darkness within, and we hear Bill Skarsgård's voice asking,
Who are you?
Yes, very much like Lewis Carroll's caterpillar in Adventures in Wonderland. Who are you? We see close-ups of circus imagery and it looks like Mardi Gras masks, and then a Korean war soldier dropping with his face wounded. The fact that Dick Hallorann knew what that specific type of saffron rice was from low country cuisine, maybe he did spend some time in New Orleans, but he also seems to be a Korean war veteran, as Leroy Hanlon was. We see various shots from trenches of dying soldiers, and then in the distant tree line, there's a woman with the yellow smoke in the background right as a mortar hits the trench. Back in the sewer, More kids' toys plop in the water. We see an Easter Bunny toy plopping too, maybe debris from the Easter Sunday Kitchener Ironworks explosion. But then Dick Hallorann looks up at the floating bodies. One of them looks like that female figure that was standing in the tree line in its vision, and he identifies her as...
Grandma.
Yes, his grandmother. We actually learn that the grandmother of Dick Hallorann was the one who had the shine and passed it down to him. He tells Danny this in The Shining, how he would have whole conversations with his grandmother without moving their lips.
I can remember when I was a little boy, my grandmother and I could hold conversations entirely without ever opening our mouths. She called it shining.
And Dick actually later confirms to Leroy that it was his grandmother.
My grandmama said it's like seeing things without seeing things.
Hallorann's grandmother floats down to grab him here and to warn him, and in a panic, he opens the hatch door, not realizing he's actually opened the cargo bay door of the helicopter. General Shaw asks him afterward,
You saw it. More like it saw me.
So here's Shaw connected with a man with these telepathic insights that they both saw the true nature of evil in this entity, though Hallorann did not see the full clown form yet, just its eyes. Hallorann says,
It wasn't supposed to see us. It wasn't supposed to know.
I think the suggestion here is that what will happen in the black spot is Pennywise striking back at Hallorann for taking this glimpse. At the diner, Will tells Rich how Alan Shepard went into space with pee in his suit. Actually, Alan Shepard was not the first human in space. That was Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin, technically the first human in space. But, you know, this is America in 1962. The public school propaganda might just not acknowledge these Soviet accomplishments. As Rich dreams about the girls he has crushes on, his carousel show tune dream of Margie is interrupted by Lily and Ronnie banging on the window. You'll notice nearby more missing kid posters. They agree to help the girls develop photographs they take, and Rich reveals he wrote poems on the inside of his shoe. Frances reunites with Rose in her secondhand store, and they talk about their fading memories of Derry.
Derry's funny that way. No matter how long you spend here, the further away you get, the more it all just seems to fade. Some would say it's for the best.
This is another aspect to the evil in Derry in the novel. The trauma that the entity inflicts on the residents gets wiped from their memories when they move away from the town. It's part of why it can continue to live undisturbed in the small main town without people who escape it alerting outside authorities who would probably just evacuate and nuke the town. Rose agrees to work with Shaw when it comes to the dig sites, and we see the two kids' last day together when Rose returned the slingshot to him. The fact that Rose still remembers this is just based on the fact that she still lives in Derry. Kind of like Mike Hanlon. He's the one of them who stays in Derry, so he's the one who has the clearest memories of what happened. Lily takes the other three to the Derry standpipe hangout, and Rich finds a box for a model airplane. We're reminded of Bill and Georgie making the model boat that floated down the storm drain, and it seems like Richie is like, no, as it floats somewhere else. You gotta imagine the wind is floating it right down into one of those storm drains. As they speculate what the entity is, Rich suggests an evil spirit from his cultural tradition.
It's an oricha. What? You know, an evil spirit?
He says his uncle was a spiritual priest who would conjure spirits of dead ancestors to get shit done. But the term Richie used there was Orisha, which refers to divine spirits from the Yoruba religion that originated in West Africa and then through the African diaspora and the Atlantic slave trade made its way to the Caribbean cultures like Santeria of Cuba and Voodoo of Haiti. According to the teachings of these religions, the Orishas are spirits sent by the supreme creator, Olodumare, to assist humanity and guide humanity on Earth. Maybe this series will do that thing that horror and sci-fi fiction likes to do and suggest that all of these things are just alternate names for Maturin, or, you know, even Maturin isn't alone in the pantheon of gods in Stephen King's lore, so maybe he kind of fits into that hierarchy. Hallorann joins the Hanlons for dinner. Leroy notices a white couple eyeing him racistly across the street. I don't like where this is progressing. Hallorann seems to be reading Charlotte, or maybe he can just tell that she doesn't like the town, and Leroy totally notices when Hallorann asks about the son that Leroy and Charlotte have not yet even mentioned. This is similar to the moment in The Shining when Wendy wonders how Dick knew that Danny's nickname was Doc. Dick says that he must have heard her call him by that name. He's used to kind of covering stuff up like this by saying he must have just heard it somewhere. Leroy says that he felt Dick Hallorann in his head on that night when Shaw tested his fear abilities on the base. Hallorann promises that since Leroy doesn't feel fear, he's not gonna fuck with him. The kids do a shoddy seance in the cemetery since Rich doesn't really know what he's doing. Rich repeats a Spanish prayer for the dead, the Santa Maria, but nothing happens at first. I like how you'll notice Rich move so that Will would have to sit next to Ronnie, and then later when they face outward, Will does touch her hand. The girls call bullshit and leave, but as they they pedal away, we enter a CGI-looking night ride with the mist setting in, and when a headstone statue of Jesus Christ turns to smile an evil grin, pulling his sacred heart open wider, you know a true evil who doesn't give a shit about being sacrilegious has arrived. The cemetery gate stretches further and further away, and the headstones crack, the ground opens up, and the kids are chased by ghosts of loved ones and friends. Rich is Tio, who we talked about before. It looks like Maddie chasing Lily, and then Susie Malkin chasing Ronnie. It's sometimes hard to know which kid is which, and I will admit in my video last week, I might have mixed up whether it was Teddy or Phil who got ripped in half in the air, but hey, I was just going by the actors in the behind the scenes featurette afterwards, and the kid who plays Phil was bragging about getting an epic death, and then the behind the scenes featurette cut to some kid smacking against a projector window. I was just going based on that. But yes, either way, there was some kind of weird error where there's definitely one extra kid in that final cut of that episode. But it does seem to be Teddy popping down here in front of Ronnie when she tries to take a photo of Susie. The kids keep fumbling the camera and retrieving it to take a picture. Will falls down into a collapsed mausoleum, and Will is the last one with the camera and takes it into the mausoleum where we saw something move past the opening. All we see for now is the clown gloved hand and a dark frilled sleeve. The kids end up developing the photos at Derry High School, where all the photos they got of their friends' ghost forms developed clearly, along with one final one that Will took, showing a new form that they did not recognize: the clown. Pennywise finally revealed. I will not want to keep this photo anywhere around me, because you know Pennywise could totally jump out of that and start choking them. Comment down below with your thoughts, and a special thanks to one of our YouTube members, Marisa Miranda, for supporting us at the executive producer level. Follow me at Erik Voss and subscribe to all the channels in the new Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.